Hi, boys and girls. Hi again. Hi from Hero. We're back. We're going to read another chapter. Okay? Chapter 4. So Friday's missing from Hotel for Dogs. See what time it is. Okay. The cold gray stone building of the city pound loomed large in front of them. Neither sibling wanted to be there, but they felt that they didn't have a choice. It was the only place they hadn't checked. Oh boy. Bruce swallowed hard. It looks like a prison, he said grimly. Andy nodded. The place gave her the creeps, too. Inside, rows of metal cages were stacked from floor to ceiling like jail cells. Each cell had its own canine inmate looking desperate to be freed. The dogs paced, howled, and barked. Bruce and Andy could barely look at them. They trudged toward the front desk with their flyers just as an animal control employee walked in with a small white terrier snagged in his dog catching loop. He was headed for one of the cages. "It's Friday!" Bruce yelled. "That's him! That's our dog!" Andy called to the dog catcher, who stopped and looked from the kids to the dog. He pointed to Friday as if to say, "Is this yours?" Bruce and Andy eagerly nodded, sure that the man would simply hand Friday over to them. But the dog catcher smirked and then put Friday in a cage, slamming the door loudly before locking it. Andy stepped up to a guy at the front desk. He was holding one of her flyers about Friday. "He just came in," said the man, whose name tag identified him as Jake. "We know him. We just saw him," Andy said hopefully. "I love it when these stories have a happy ending," Jake said without enthusiasm. "Well, we're open until 6, so just bring your parents in," and Andy's heart sank. Parents? Wait, no, is that really necessary? We're already here, and that's our dog. "Listen, kid, there's a whole thing with paperwork. And I am not about to go screwing up the paperwork. That is not who I am," Jake said firmly. While Andy pleaded with Jake, Bruce looked around the pound. It was definitely overcrowded, but at least the dogs seemed to be fed regularly, and they sort of had each other for company. If anything, the pound was a warm place to sleep on a cold night. Maybe, just maybe, it wasn't such a prison after all. Bruce began to relax a little, but what he saw a few seconds later made him panic. An animal control guy was struggling as he led a dog down a long hallway toward a door marked 13. When he came out a short while later, the employee came out of the room holding nothing but an empty leash. Oh. It was then that Bruce noticed the sign, "Check for your lost dog every day. We can only hold animals for 72 hours. It didn't take a genius to figure out what happened if no one claimed the dogs. He tugged on Andy's sleeve and pointed at the sign. She read it quickly and turned back to Jake. "All right," she told him. "I'm going to level with you. That dog means everything to us. We've had him for a long time, and I honestly don't know what we'd do if anything happened to us. My parents aren't coming in. I've told you the real reason. If I told you the real reason why, I'd start crying. You'd start crying, and it would be a big, miserable mess. So I'm going to give you every penny I have in the world, and you're going to look the other way and let that dog out." Andy dug into her bag and put all the money she had down on the desk. Jake looked at her for a moment. "I'm only doing this because I'm a good guy," he said before grabbing the money and stuffing it into his pocket. As the two walked home with Friday, Andy told her brother, "We can't send him outside alone anymore. If Friday gets picked up and taken to the pound again, we may not be able to get him out. And it's just going to get harder once school starts," Andy sighed. "I think we need to find a place for Friday to live." "I've got a few ideas," Bruce offered brightly. "We'll look for a—" But Andy stopped him. "We've been hiding him in alleys and garages for 3 years, Bruce," she said. "I think he'd be better off in a real home with a real family." "We are a real family," Bruce insisted. Just then they were startled by a loud noise. A group of kids ran past them and disappeared into an alley, followed by a police car. As it rounded the corner, its headlights shined right at Andy and Bruce. They immediately took off down the street with Friday leading the way. "Hold on up there!" a police officer called out. He and his partner jumped out of the car and began to run after them. Andy, Bruce, and Friday raced down another alley, dodging dumpsters and old cardboard boxes. They could hear the officers' footsteps gaining on them. Turning right at the end of the alley, they found themselves face to face with a monstrous old building. Friday darted through a small crack in one of the doors. The siblings hesitated. The place looked abandoned, with most of the windows on the ground floor boarded up, a dilapidated sign crookedly over the delivery entrance. It read, Hotel Francis Duke. Friday, Bruce called. The officer's footsteps grew louder and louder. They had apparently split up and were closing in from both directions. Did he have to pick the creepiest building in the alley? Bruce asked, as he grabbed his sister and pulled her through one of the doors of the old hotel. As soon as the door closed behind them, they were cloaked in darkness. They held their breaths as they listened to the police officers outside. After a while, there was complete silence. Let's just find Friday and get out of here, Andy said. Bruce found a small flashlight in his backpack. When he flipped it on, the two saw that they were in a long, dusty hallway. Andy and Bruce walked cautiously down the hall. It led them to a large, open area, cluttered with all kinds of stuff, from worn furniture to old books and newspapers. The walls were covered with tarp and scaffolding, as if someone had once tried to fix the place up. The siblings picked their way carefully across the room to avoid bumping into giant stacks of cardboard boxes and statues covered in dust. Bruce glanced up at the huge cobweb-covered glass chandeliers above them. At the end of the room was a long staircase leading up to a second-floor balcony. This must have been the lobby, Bruce started to say, but a strange voice interrupted him. Did you hear that? They stood quietly for several minutes. When they didn't hear anything else, Andy was reassured. See, it's just an old hotel, she said before a series of thuds began. Those are footsteps, Bruce suggested nervously. Hotels don't make footsteps. People make footsteps when they walk through hotels with their feet. You make a good point, Andy said, inching closer to Bruce. Who else was in the hotel? She wondered. Suddenly, something darted in front of the flashlight beam. Bruce tracked the object with the light and saw the shadow of a huge animal. Andy covered her mouth to stifle a scream, but as the beast leaped over to them, they saw it was a tiny black and white Boston Terrier with perky ears and a sweet face. Andy heaved a sigh of relief until a giant, hungry-looking mastiff appeared. Friday raced out of the darkness. Friday! Bruce yelled, happy to see his dog again. Watch out, Andy called, not sure how the other two dogs would react to Friday. But there was no cause for concern. All the dogs wagged their tails as they greeted each other. It looked like a reunion of old friends. After the happy salutations, the dogs scampered up the lobby stairs. Do you think they belong to anyone? Bruce asked as they followed the dogs. If they did, if they did, would they be here? Andy said. Better here than at the Pound. The mastiff led them to one of the guest rooms on the second floor. There wasn't much in the room except for a king-size bed. The mastiff jumped up onto the bed, followed by Friday. Then the Boston Terrier hopped up and found a cozy spot between the two larger dogs. It was as if they had been friends their whole lives. Bruce and Andy could hardly believe their eyes. What about just leaving Friday with them tonight? Bruce asked. He had a good feeling about this place. Well, he won't be lonely, Andy answered. It would be better than leaving him alone outside where he could be picked up by animal control. One night. Andy walked over to the window and pulled down the dusty old shade. When she turned back, the dogs were already fast asleep. It looked like Friday had decided he was going to stay. Andy and Bruce walked quietly out of the room. Good night, guys, Bruce whispered. The end of chapter 4. We'll be back. I'll be back. We will be back. Hero and I will be back for another chapter reading. Bye, guys.